Hello, welcome to Painting with Commentary for Paint to Life episode 33, our Headless Horseman, Tybost the Elegant, riding Vesper the Nightmare. This is a Pathfinder Battles Deep Cuts miniature, Dullahan model. So going with the storyline, I wanted to have a tree with a noose in the early stages of my design. That was harder to find than you'd think. Most branches, when they get to branch level, don't have nearly as many appendages like a tree would. So the solution, take some twigs, cut them with an X-Acto knife, and super glue them to each other, which is what I'm doing here. Anytime you're using a knife, unless you're a cadet, you don't want to cut yourself, so make sure you put on your safety gloves. As you see, mine are on there. Super thin variant. Anytime you're using a knife, be cool. I'm using Gorilla Glue, just gel form. It helps keep the branches in place while they set. It takes about 30 seconds of holding it in place, as you can see here, for it to set gently, and then you just have to be careful that you don't flick it or knock it over or set it down on top of one of the newly glued appendages. Check some examples of real-world trees to get an idea of boughs and how they would form if you'd like, and glue yourself together a little miniature tree. But glue isn't enough. I'm going to use liquid green stuff to seal it. Liquid green stuff from Citadel line, painted on with a brush, a little bit of water. It goes in the cracks around the edges where the glue was, and just helps, I find, when it dries, just adds a little more strength. I mean, I'm sure it's not a super strong, it's not glue by any means, but by using liquid green stuff, it eliminates that seam anyways, makes it look a little bit more natural, and it does add a little bit of extra resilience to the piece. Not that we're handling it much, but anything helps and everything helps. So liquid green stuff is the next thing I'm going to add here. I suppose you could use milliput or regular green stuff, but I find that would be very difficult because there's lots of those little boughs, little elbow joints, and it's nice to be being able to apply that on there. I suppose you might be able to use baking soda with your super glue to cure it a little better. So I'm going to use some XPS foam. I'm going to super glue it to this circle disc. Again, it's bigger than the large size of the Headless Horseman, but I'm using my hot wire cutter to just cut out the disc shape. I know these shapes are not to scale, but I don't use the bases so much as for scale on the mat. I use it more for a diorama. So I put the mini on and I kind of etch out where the path needs to be and where the tree is going to go. So I kind of press in to make an indentation, and using my hot wire cutter, I'm going to now scoop out the area that's going to be lower. I want to have almost like an embankment here. This is just, go for it work. If you make too much of a mistake or if you take too much off, then you will just tear off the XPS foam and glue another piece on and start again. But if you just have fun with it, you can have all kinds of neat shapes and edges. And like in nature, nothing is perfect, so you don't want to have hard lines. I use a toothbrush when I make some of those fine cuts to cut them off. And I have fully intended to put some basing material on top of this anyway, so I don't mind that it's a little ripply. It's great for an underwater look of sand, but for our path, I will smooth that out. So I tested, I put my mini on here, which, by the way, I'm going to realize later, I'm going to take him off his base. So I'm using my hot wire cutter with the other attachment that burns holes. So I'm using it to burn to basically just sear in where the hole is going to be, where the skull was dug up in the story. So now that I have this, the next thing I need to do is prime the XPS foam. And this is great using craft paint, white, just something to cover it so that I can paint it. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to wreck this a little bit. Now, I still was able to salvage it, but I'm going to warn you all what not to do. So I got some baby stones and sand, and I'm going to put that on top of this to make gritty ground texture en masse. First, I'm going to put the baby stones around the edges, then I'm going to put the sand on top. This is the mistake I made. I primed that with Chaos Black spray paint. It was a bad idea. I thought that the craft white paint would seal it and prevent the spray paint's accelerant from melting the foam. It did not. So that foam that you see there, I'm applying Citadel Sterling mud on top of my stones and sand, which was not shown, so you can see the texture of them all. But the XPS foam shrunk 20%. And I was very sad because it sponged now, it was spongy, didn't have the sharp edges I was looking for, and I was almost going to have to scrap it and redo it. Then I realized once by the time I coat all the sterling mud on top of it, you're not going to be able to tell anyways, as you can see. So I left myself my path, and it's time to mud that up and then paint the tree. I painted this tree many times with a Mournfang brown here, as you can see. I'm going to paint it multiple colors. I liked this brown at first, but then I went with a little bit more light brown, and then I dry brushed it, and then I added another color. You know, as Bob Ross would say, it's the joy of painting, you know? You try something. I didn't mind that color. What do you think? I mean, it's pretty poo brown. I don't know many trees that are that color, though. And even though that was my first choice, when it dried, it was a little too orange. So let's paint it again. I think I hit it with Baneblade next. But it's to each your own and what you're trying to achieve. I mean, I'm sure there are trees that look like that, maybe just not the ones in the fall that I was kind of looking for. The ones in southern Ontario, Canada, where I live, they don't look like that. So time to paint it again. You can see it dried a little less orange. Here's the Baneblade brown. I'm putting in the hole to signify the mud. But then I think I'm going to put that same color on that tree. I think when I saw that in the hole, trying to make like this sandy kind of or earthy pit, I realized, you know, maybe that's a good color for the tree. You know, I'm painting around the edges. I don't want it to be too, like, I don't want the paint to be too symmetrical. I want it to look like the dirt. See, it was thrown on top of the sterling mud. As you were digging that hole, it was going all over. Hence the spillage that I'm painting around the edge right there. And now we're putting that same Baneblade brown on the tree. I think I saw the dirt. I said, yeah, that's more like what a tree looks like. And I think I put it on extra light too with some water, so that it's almost going on like a light glaze. It's semi-transparent. Maybe some of that orange brown will shine through. At the end of the day, folks, I can't exactly tell you what that tree is colored, because by the time I was finished with it, I painted so many times. You just have to look at it and say, do you like your end product? And when I look at that, I say, yeah, that to me looks more like a tree. Now, one thing I didn't mention in this video, how did I get the tree in there? I used hot glue gun. Just make sure when you're using hot glue and XPS foam that you don't put too much, too fast, too heavy, or it'll melt right through your foam. Well, look at this, I'm painting the tree again. XV88, let's give that color a try. And this one I didn't like because it was a little too green. It probably should have just stuck with the last color, but we'll see. So here's the tree, and now we're going to do some Dawnstone dry brushing. So dry brushing, and put some Dawnstone paint dry brush on, and I'm just applying it. I put a little too much paint on, a little too zealous, as you can see there. I was trying to make it look like a gravel road or some kind of road. It's certainly not. Oh yeah, look at that, way too much. Yeah, I still like the way this base turned out, but it's almost like a sidewalk in a modern day world. Now we're putting some Gorthor in the bowels of the dirt hole. And now it's time for some grass, because I've done enough browns. So I'm putting some tasty white glue everywhere where I'm going to put some of my flocking, some of my grass. This is just white glue with a little bit of water to make it a little runnier. And I'm putting it where I want the grass to be, knowing full well that I'm going to add leaves on top of that and some tufts to get some taller grass. Now I don't have a static grass applicator, so I can't get the grass to stand straight up. I was going to buy one, but it's $100, and for the amount I do it, maybe I'll get one day. But for now, just put it in my box and I sprinkle it on there. Okay? This is summer undergrowth from Army Painter. The trick is to put it on gently, just a little bit at a time, and then turn it over upside down and tap the bottom of it to try and force those little sons of bitches to stand up on their ends. This is what the cheap bastards do, right? We don't have the static applicator, but we just sprinkle it on there, flip it upside down, and tap the shit out of the bottom of the model, and hopefully that causes it to stand up, which it does somewhat. So now I put a little pile here of green stuff. This is going to be my earth pile, and this is kind of neat. This is called Shrubbery. It's from Green Stuff World. Tall Shrubbery. It's a green and white variant. It's really creepy looking material when you look at it. Look at it there on the lower right, but when it's out of the box and you start nestling it together, it really looks pretty spectacular. They have different colors there. You should check them out. Now it's time for the leaves. So I'm using some white glue mixed with water, and I'm applying this where I want the leaves to go, nowhere else. Just remember, these are fall leaves. They're going to group up where wind would blow them against ledges, around corners, the base of the tree. Then this was what I did. I went outside, I grabbed some fall leaves, I put them in a convection oven for 10 minutes at 110 degrees just to heat them up so that they were super dry. And then I crushed them with my hands. They look like little chips. And actually, I almost ate them a few times thinking they were ketchup chips. Now I use my finger, I pat them down on that grass that I just did, tap them off, and then gently, I got a skull in there from Green Stuff World, the resin skulls. And then we're going to hit the sterling mud again on top of that green liquid, that green stuff there, that little pile of dirt. First sterling mud to give it some texture, then we're going to paint some brown on top of it, and that's that. So once those little once those little leaf flakes are finished, use a toothbrush and gently scrape them away so that the loose ones fall off, and then seal the rest in with some more glue. We'll put some of that sterling mud on top of the leaves as well to look like the hole was dug. So there we go. That's the base, and now it's time to paint the Nightmare and our Headless Horseman, Tybost the Elegant. So the Nightmare is a straight black, Abaddon black horse. There's really not much to it. In episode 28 of Paint to Life, I painted Vesper the Nightmare. That particular model was the Nightmare model from WizKids, Knowles of Marvelous Miniatures. It was translucent. You can go back and check that. I'll put the link to it here. Okay, now that Nightmare was clear, so I painted it with inks, and then I put the Mordant Earth black crackle paint on top of it to make it crack, and then you could see through it if you held it up to light. Underneath the black would have this kind of fiery red, yellow, orange glow effect. But unfortunately, this particular model isn't clear, so I'm not going to be able to achieve that. Now, I suppose I could have drawn little teeny freehand lines, but as I've told you before, I am not the best painter. I paint for storytelling, for table ready, and to my best ability. And not to mention I paint one of these every week and have to edit the YouTube video, create the story, put it all together every week. So I don't have the luxury of spending 74 hours on a model that some people have. As someone recently criticized me as, well, his mini painting leaves a little bit desired. Yeah, I guess so. You're probably not wrong. I'm not setting out to win awards. What I'm setting out to do is tell a story. I'm taking this piece of shit gray plastic and painting it to life with color and a story that you can then use and put on your table and have something right out of the box that's got everything you need to go along with it. So in this case, this miniature, I'm following that kind of drive. Now, of course, at this part in the game, I wasn't really considering taking it off the base, but we'll get to that later. So now I'm painting all these tassels and straps and saddles because, again, Dullahan, the Headless Horseman, rides just a black midnight mare. This is a nightmare. I don't really know that she would have a saddle, that Vesper would be saddled. But it's the model we're working with, so we're going to paint the saddle anyways. Originally, my plan was to maybe incorporate a little bit of singe to the saddle, some burnt. I had a cloth, like a horse blanket, under the saddle. I was going to try and put some burn effect. Totally ran out of time. Wasn't going to happen. So what we ended up having was a black horse with your regular kind of horse and saddle, some screaming skull for the horse blanket underneath, which is going on there now, and some washes, some Nuln Oils and some Agrax Earth Shades just to dirty it up. And that's what we have. And, it's a black horse. But it's still a pretty fun model. Tried to use some different browns for the different straps so that they weren't all the same. If you have multiple browns, great. See, I'm just using Bane Blade again. I had that from the dirt. I also used Steel Legion Drab earlier. It kind of flew by. If you have the ability to put different browns when you have different straps, that's good because it'll make them all look different, but of the same family. And if you only have one brown paint, grab your white and black and mix a little white to make a lighter brown, or mix a little black to make a darker brown, or use your shades to achieve the same kind of thing. Heavier shade on the bottom one, lighter shade on the top. You can do anything, buddy. Sky's the limit. You do what your heart tells you, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because I'm telling you, just by taking this project on, your finished product is going to look so much better than anything that was unpainted on the table. So Mournfang Brown is my color of choice for the saddle. I think I had this out for the tree. I try and use the same paints again if I can, so long as it doesn't make too few of a diversity in the finished picture, in the finished model, if you will. Again, that's the saddle. Now as we finish up, we're looking into this being a nightmare. So this Clydesdale's furry boots on his horseshoes and his mane and his tail, it's not going to be black, it's going to be on fire. Without the element of clear plastic, we're going to have to use some paints. So we're going to start with Wild Rider Red. It's a very orangey red. I like it as my base coat for my fiery things. By the time this is done, she'll almost be completely covered, but that's okay, because if there's any cracks or any pieces that get missed further on, or a little bit of transparency, she'll shine through, and it will kind of give you that deep glow effect underneath the fire. If you imagine this thing is from hell, and it's just wrecked with heat. So we're doing her hooves, her tail, and her mane. And notice I'm painting from the bottom up. I'm doing that because as I go up the model, rather than going top down and having to paint over things, you always paint from the inside out. So the model, the horse, Vesper, she's what he's sitting on. So I'll paint her and I'll spill on him, on Tybost. But that's okay, because then when I paint him, as long as I'm careful not to hit her, then he'll be finished without having to go over Vesper. And the more you paint, the more steady your hand will get, and the more you'll learn how to paint curves and straight lines. And even when we just paint for fun, we'll still get better at it. And you see a little dot for an eye on each side. I was riding high on the paint on the camera in this episode. I didn't keep it in focus enough, and that's okay. It's good enough you can see it, but I really need to upgrade my station so I have a monitor I can actually see, so I can keep things centered. Because if I centered it the whole time, then I could zoom in on it, since I have this 4K camera. Okay, so here we are. The mane is done, the hooves are done, the eye is done, the tail is done. And we're going to move on to our next color. I think I might have already must have missed a color total there. There's an orange going on there right now. I missed. See here, the eyes. So I missed a color flag. It would have been one of the other oranges, because this is coming up to Troll Slayer orange. But nevertheless, here comes Troll Slayer orange. So I start with Wild Rider red, then there's a reddy orange. Dang, sorry I don't have that. But again, it doesn't really matter what colors you use if you follow the idea that it starts red, then goes to a red orange, then it goes to a straight orange, which is what I'm at right now with this Troll Slayer orange. And then I'm going to hit it with a Flash Gits yellow as the top coat. And then those four colors together. Make sure you thin your paints when you're putting on your Flash Gits in this, even this Troll Slayer. You want it thin so it applies light and the pigment lets the darker color underneath shine through. Iron Warriors is a great dark metal Citadel paint line color. Any type of undead, or like he was the Minotaur from a couple weeks ago. But I'm going to use Iron Warriors for his plate, and then some Storm Host Silver for for layering and edging, I guess, later. Sometimes I'll tell you too, guys, if you're ever painting and trying to film, I mean, the love is in the paint, right? You're just there, you're listening to someone's YouTube channel or podcast or music, or you're watching Netflix in the background, and you just want to paint, right? When you're filming and trying to paint and document your process, sometimes you forget, and next thing you know, you're like, oh shit, I'm 4 pieces past and I haven't been recording it, because the camera, you can imagine, is in my way, right there. It's where I'm putting it where my head would be, so you guys can see what I see, but of course now there's a camera in my way. So yeah, sometimes that's the downside of trying to paint what you're filming. Now this is Cantor Blue. I've decided I'm going to start painting more blue things. I never paint blue enough, and it's a really pretty color, and this is a really nice one. So this is a Purple Dragon Knight Tybost who has fallen. So I really wanted to catch his cloak, to have a nice purple cloak with a nice deep blue underneath, because it's definitely a layered coat. There's an underlayer or an undercoat and then the overcoat. So I decided to use this Cantor blue as the under, and then I'm going to use a Xerxes purple later for the overtop. But now that I'm on this, I'm going back to Flash Gates yellow to finish the horse's hooves now that the other orange is dried. See, I'm staying on top. I'm not covering everything. I'm keeping the paint thin. I'm doing a horrible job of keeping this centered. Again, I apologize. I'm trying to put just a light coating of yellow, very thin, very watery, so the pigment dries almost like translucent a bit to help us see the Troll Slayer orange plus the other orange that I didn't write down plus the Wild Rider red underneath. And if you do it right and practice, you'll have a cool fiery effect. Again, not the best at this by any means, but you know what? I think that looks sexy. I think that looks like fire. Top of the eye, little pupils. I'm gonna go down by this guy's crotch region. Oh yeah, the lips. I did this little teeny line in the nostrils. Just use a thin, small 0 gauge brush, gently drape it across. There's the fine hands. And if you mess up, this is not too big of a deal. You can even paint across the mouth line, and then where you accidentally touch the black, then just paint the black on top of the yellow, and then it's fine. It's in the crease. So yeah, just touching up some areas where there was too much red. There was like an entire thumbnail of, or a push pin of red. Okay, no, I have to hit it with some yellow. So there it is. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to move on to the Xerxes purple. Now not Xerxes, Xerus purple. So you won't see it in this video, but there's lots of layering on this. This was a good example where I took that purple and I just added some black to it. So I took my purple, I painted the whole cloak. Then I added a drop of black and I painted some layers. Then I added another drop of black and painted some deeper layers. Then I added one more drop of black and I painted under the arms and under the waist. So it goes on one layer and then you keep making it darker and darker and darker and hitting those layers. So when it all dries, you don't just have one solid purple. That's the one thing you never want to do. You could achieve that with shading, like shades as well. But it's better to get it done with paints first and then put the shaders on. So now this head, some Steel Legion drab for the hair. So this Headless Horseman is probably carrying his own head. But in our story, Sir Tybost is collecting the heads of the people that Jacob Froze is sending him after to kill, people who wronged Tybost in his life. Kislev flesh, my go-to Caucasian flesh color from Games Workshop. You can tint it up with other oranges and tans for different skin tones, but this was straightforward. A couple of yellow, white dots for pupils, a little bit of red and pinks, and the purple for the gore line will do nicely. Reichland flesh shade on top of it. That's a contrast paint. It will settle into the nooks and crannies of the eyes, nose, mouth, and give you nice definitions that you don't have to manually paint on. So now I made a noose out of green stuff. Funny fact, I'm trying to actually wrap it around the tree the way a real noose would. It occurs to me later I could have just made a noose and glued it to the tree. Here I am trying to curl this sticky ass this green stuff and make an actual noose. I'm trying to tie it and make it look like a knot, and then I have to wrap it around and attach it. Long story short, next time just make a noose and glue it to the tree trunk, but that's okay. And then I paint that brown effectively, and now we're on to the final part of the basing. This fall colored moss, this is a great product from Green Stuff World. Those are the colors, and I had some green as well. I know it's not quite the same texture or look as the crumpled leaves on the ground, but that's okay, because at a distance of just 2 feet, that tree looks pretty damn awesome, if I don't say so myself. Everyone who's seen it in real life, I mean, it looks like, I'm just turning around now, looking at it on my shelf. Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. I mean, it looks like a fall tree, folks. And what color are trees? Some leaves are yellow, some leaves are orange, some leaves are brown, some leaves are still green. Using this moss and some super glue to tack it onto the tree, and then I thickened it up with a little bit more the next day. You can't go wrong. There was then I trimmed my bush. Haha, it's phrasing. Trim out some of the excess parts that are a little too toughy, and you're good. So we're putting it on sparingly, and again, because I made this tree out of twigs with so many appendages, I have lots of places to apply this. Just make sure you take the strong parts of the moss, like the stem parts, and glue them flush with the branch so it kind of looks organic. Man, I rode high this whole video. Jesus Christ. My apologies. Let's check out the finished product and see how she turned out. There he is. There's his tree. There's Dullahan, the Headless Horseman. This is another angle. These are all my pictures, not just the ones I used in Paint to Life. Some of these were rejects. So there's another angle of them. Again, I think that nightmare turned out pretty spectacular. Quick note, that's not extra white lighting on that's just my lights when I took the picture. I didn't do any like white layering to show glare. There's a picture from behind the tree. You can see the noose there, the hole with the skull in it. There's his little head hole. I don't usually go into how I painted gore because everyone loves painting gore. It's what everyone signs up for when they start painting. A couple more shots up close with that kind of looks like almost like a concrete path with those leaves. Leaves turned out great. And the tree, everything about this, I was very happy with this. So I hope you guys were too. Anyways, if you have any questions, as always, you can email me at painttolife@gmail.com. Leave any questions in the comments below. I'll get to them. And I hope you enjoyed this painted tutorial with commentary. I'm GMA Tank. Wash your hands, people. See you next time.